Good afternoon. My name's Bridget Tian and I'd like to welcome you all today and thank you for coming and attending the first in a series of disaster recovery conversations which are being brought to you by the Victorian Council of Social Service. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm presenting here today, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I extend that respect, of course, to all Aboriginal peoples and clans across Victoria and beyond, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples attending today. I'd also like to acknowledge the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation, which has generously provided the funding for this project, which is enabling these disaster recovery conversations to be shared with you. I'd like to also introduce and thank our Auslan interpreters who you may see on the screen. We have two with us today, Cheryl Sandilands and Gabriel Kirby. So a huge thank you to the both of them. So today we're here to take an in-depth look at children and young people in disaster recovery. We're going to hear from 4 speakers, including a young person, and this will be followed by a joint Q&A session. If you've got questions, please submit them in the chat. We've got a moderator sitting in the background who will be able to look at your questions and pass them through to me as today's facilitator. And if we have time, we'll answer those questions at the end of each presenter's presentation. And if not, then we'll do a joint panel session toward the end. And finally, and before we get started, just a reminder that this conversation is being recorded and will be uploaded to the VCOSS website. This means that you can come back and view it at any time and, of course, share it with your colleagues and networks. But enough of the boring stuff, so let's get started. Our first speaker today, and that I'd like to really warmly welcome, is Michelle Roberts. Michelle is the Director of the Australian National University's Australian Child and Adolescent Trauma, Loss and Grief Network. Michelle has a long history of studying and working with children and disasters in Australia and across the world, beginning with the Ash Wednesday bushfires back in the 1980s. Michelle brings with her an extraordinary wealth of professional insight and experience, and we're really incredibly lucky to have her here today to share some of her wisdom with us. Welcome, Michelle, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction. And I always feel a bit self-conscious when we talk about the fact that I've been doing this work since the 1980s because it immediately dates me for everyone. But I have to say it's been quite a lovely opportunity to work for that length of time in an area that I feel so passionate about. And I have seen enormous change in the period of time that I've been doing this work. In fact, after the Ash Wednesday bushfires, there was just a handful of research papers that gave any mention of children in a disaster context and any consideration of their needs and vulnerabilities. And now we know that there's quite a lot more knowledge and research happening in the area, perhaps still not as much as there is with adults, but it's increasing and it's very heartening to see. So why is it so important to think about infants, children and young people in the disaster context? And I noted that Bridget spoke specifically to the recovery context, and it's been my experience that we can't talk about recovery unless we also think about preparedness, the response phase, what happens in relief, because that all sets us up for whether it's a difficult recovery or something that falls into an expected pattern and we're able to put in place the supports that allow people to make sense of the experience and allows families and the children within those families to make sense of the experience and then progress with their life. So in preparing for today, I was giving some consideration to the most recent fires that we've had in 2019 and 2020, and of course, the emerging information that we're starting to receive from the WA fires as well. There's never, unfortunately, a shortage of current events to be reflecting about whenever I get asked to speak to a group such as yourselves. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation as the day or this afternoon progresses. But there are 5.5 million children in Australia, and that's from the 2018 census. And we know that, therefore, young people make up 1/5 of the whole population of Australia. And that's quite remarkable to think about that sheer number, because I can guarantee that that's not represented in the mental health funding And I look forward to seeing that change as well. About a third of those young people in the 5.5 million bucket are in the 0 to 4 age group. And for a long time, we thought that babies through to very young toddlers really don't know what's going on in a disaster. And we sure know now that that's not the case. Back in 1980s, we really didn't think about the impact, as I said, on young people. I was a secondary school teacher in a school that was impacted by the Ash Wednesday bushfires, and we knew that it had been a really horrible time, and we were aware of our colleagues and our students who had had tragic losses, but we were of the view that getting back to routine was going to be helpful for them, and we had the same expectations of their learning and concentration abilities as we had pre-fires. What a mistake that was, and I'm glad to see that we have more research that's informing our teaching and learning practices after a disaster context now than we did back then. So 30% or a third roughly, 0 to 4, much the same with the 5 to 9 age group, and in 10 to 14 they're also representative of about a third of the population. 16% is in the 15 to 17 age group. The numbers alone say that we need to be investing more time and thought and energy into these age groups. So why does this group matter so much? Well, they're representative of a good smack of our population, but we also know that they are developing beings, and we've all heard a number of times the sense that this is our future. Our young people are our futures. And so investing our time and our knowledge and our wisdom and our support in those very vulnerable, able to be impacted and changed young growing beings is so very, very important. We think about their neurological development, we think about physical development, attachment and social and psychological well-being, and we know that often the people that they look to guide them after something like a disaster are similarly affected. Our teachers, the parents, the carers, so those very small children whose reference point is the adults in their life for whether they're safe or not, are struggling themselves, and that alters the course of development for those children. Our 5 to 10-year-olds have some of their own ability to make sense and to understand the threat and can take action to keep themselves safe during the threat, but still reach out to their carers and significant adults to support them, to make them feel safe again, and to help them understand how repair will occur and recovery will progress from that point. And of course, our young people are in a situation where they look to themselves, their peers, and their family to make sense of the experience. And I keep on talking about making sense of the experience, but there are some experiences that are really difficult to navigate. And it's when we can actually understand, make meaning for ourselves, what it means for us, and then do some of that repair around feeling safe again and being able to predict the world again, that people can start to progress the way that they want to. So the alterations that occur to little people and young children when they feel that there's been a big threat and everything that was understandable and predictable has gone, it can have long-term, lifelong-term impacts, and they can be negative, but they can also be positive. And that's one of our more recent learnings, is that there is such a thing as post-traumatic growth. It can go hand in hand with being stressed and distressed, but that people can learn about their own abilities, and strengths in a challenging situation like that. In the literature, we also look at what's called ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, and the researchers indicated that 4 or more adverse experiences can have a life-changing impact. There was some recent work done in New South Wales with about 1,400 children and young people who were able to talk to their disaster experiences, and I'll just read off my screen the figures. This was research done for the Office of the Advocate for Children and Young People, and they asked the 1,400 odd young people about their experience of the disasters in 2020. 7% of those respondents had been impacted by 2 out of 3 of the disasters, so fire, flood, drought, and I'm sure we can put COVID in there as well. And 2% identified that they had been impacted by all 3. So if we think about the ACEs study and the 4 or more events having lifelong potential negative impact, we have a population of young people that have had more than the fair share of challenge. And what we're seeing is that COVID slowed down response. It slowed down our ability as a community more broadly to put in the supports around people who were impacted by the fires in particular, but also droughts and floods, and then those who lost livelihoods through COVID or experienced death of loved ones through COVID. And that's meant that people have had to call on their own resources for a period of time. To call on your own resources, you have to have those resources, and not every family has the social capital, the financial resources, the connection within family and community that can hold them for that period of time until they're back on their own feet and able to move forward. A lot of my work's been done in schools and education, and they are often the group of people, the teachers that we look to do that holding, to do that support, and to link families and children and young people into supports within community, or to make referrals for more targeted mental health support. And of course, with our schools being locked down here in Victoria for a period of time, that was really difficult to be monitoring people's well-being, both staff and students' well-being, not only in response to COVID, but also in response to the disaster itself. So it's really helpful to think about what might be a protective factor in a post-disaster context. And we certainly know that the better connected, the stronger the recovery. The more resources that a family or a community have, again, going back to financial and connection and people available to provide additional support, the better the recovery. We know that some people grow and learn, and that is the case for very young people, and often that's enhanced by having a sense of agency. Agency is a really interesting term, because to me what that means is that you were able to do something either before, during, or after an event that was really challenging and overwhelming, and that you can look back and say, I knew what to do, I was able to take action, and that makes me feel like it wasn't overwhelming to the point where I've just got to give up, it's all too hard. I've had really young children, as young as 4, tell me with great pride that they were able to help keep their family safe because it was their job to roll up the towels and put them at the bottom of the doors so the smoke didn't come into the house. Or a 14-year-old fellow in the Black Saturday fires who was able to keep his younger sibling breathing because he was very asthmatic by giving him wet face washes to breathe through because of the smoke. So being able to take action gives one a sense of agency and a sense of being able to navigate the space. The lovely work of Bryony Towers here in Melbourne looking at disaster resilience education has informed us that we can be preparing our very young people right up to our grade 5s and 6s, 7s, 8s and so on, to know what actions they can take to keep themselves safe and also to keep safe those that they care for and love. And that children report back that when they've had those activities that they can undertake, they actually feel less distressed and less harmed by the experience. So I think it's, for me, something to always hold in mind, that we should be doing some work with our young people before disasters and helping them to be both physically and psychologically prepared for what actions they can take, that we should be giving them an opportunity in relief centres, for example, to have child safe spaces and spaces where they can be with others to make sense of what's going on and to be feeling that they're psychologically and physically safe. And then in the recovery period, to know that we're looking at short, medium, long term, and the term was used in a meeting I was in the other day, the ability to look to the horizon, the far point of long-term recovery as well, and to plan for how we put in supports and what we can encourage and support our young people to be doing so that they know that they're part of the recovery and the repair of the things that have impacted on their lives and their environment. So I'm urging people to think about the before, during and after, and to encourage young people with how they can help in all of those stages because it gives them a better chance of managing the adversity in a positive way and helping them to continue on with their life trajectory in the best way possible. Thanks very much, Bridget.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I don't know about everybody attending, but I've been madly scribbling notes to remind me to go and look things up and follow a few things up. It's just absolutely fantastic, Michelle. A couple of things stood out to me, and one was your comment about adverse experiences for young people. And we know that amongst people who are homeless, and particularly rough sleepers, that these people have experienced traumatic events in their lives, often a whole series, or indeed sometimes too many to count. And I think that number is also 4. And amongst those traumatic experiences is, of course, things like natural disasters or major emergencies and disaster events. So when we talk about the long-term impact on children and young people, it can actually literally be a life-changing impact, and has the potential to lead to some really unhappy and adverse outcomes like homelessness. So it's really incumbent on us all to make sure that we keep these things in mind when we're working with our children and young people and supporting them in their recovery. One of the other things that stood out for me was a comment you made early on around the experiences in the emergency itself, during the response and during relief, and how important those experiences are and how they can actually set the tone for recovery. And I recall a Beyond Bushfires study that found that children who were separated from their parents during the fire, during the response or even the relief, actually had more long-term adverse outcomes than children who stayed with their parents and close to their parents. So these small little events that might have only happened in an hour or half an hour or half a day actually have a huge impact on children. Did you want to add anything to that, Michelle?
Yeah, I do. Way back with Cyclone Tracy, we were very good at evacuating children away from the threat, and that was one of the first studies that identified for us that maybe that wasn't the best option, and that imagining what's going on can often be really harmful other than being physically present and being able to appraise it for yourself. That doesn't mean I'm advocating for putting children physically at risk, but I think we have to be mindful that parents and carers and loved ones anchor infants, children, and young people, and they help to give them a starting point for knowing those people who are important in their life are safe or are doing whatever they can be doing to be safe. The imagined is as damaging sometimes as the really difficult experiences, and I think it's a really powerful thing for a family to be able to sit down and say what they remember of the time where there was an acute part of the threat, because often you don't know what everyone's doing, you don't know what everyone's thinking, and parents frequently underestimate what children understand and have witnessed. And so many families are in the situation where the children are left inside or they're sent to grandparents to be safe if there's enough warning. The kids are in the house, the parents are outside the house. Sometimes parents are on the back of a truck fighting a fire for days on end. And there is a period of uncertainty that adds another layer to the existing uncertainty of the threat itself as well. So piecing it together when you can is a very helpful strategy for making sense and knowing what perspectives were, and for adults to know what the children's interpretation is of what their experience has been. Because the child brings something of themselves to the experience, and then the experience brings something to the child. And it's important to be able to appraise those to understand how we can best support them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. And I've certainly got visions in my mind of the old black and white footage of children being put on planes and flown literally across the country to safe places. But of course, it wouldn't have felt safe to those children. And in a very much a pre-internet era, the poor communication and children not knowing what had happened to their families and loved ones must have been extraordinarily distressing. We do have a couple of questions that have come through, Michelle, and one of them is around the impacts of emergencies And are they different for children that have maybe already experienced a traumatic event, or come from some sort of a background that may be disadvantaged and vulnerable? So I'm thinking asylum seekers, victims of family violence. So children that are already kind of behind the eight ball, and what the difference is in the experiences of emergencies for those children.
I said right at the beginning, before we started, that I always do great notes and then I don't necessarily refer to them. But I did have something about that in my notes, so thank you for asking the question. Do you know, I think if you've had a lot of adversity and a lot of terrible experiences, then you can be potentiated in your physiological system to respond to adrenaline surges. And when you feel frightened, you're jumpy and you're anxious and you feel scattered and you can't navigate how to best be safe in that minute. On the other hand, we also know that sometimes young people and adults who have had a lot of adversity are good operators in a crisis. They've done it before, they know they can do it, they know they can come through the other end. Bless you. And so I think that I'd like to say it's a binary thing. You know, if you've had lots of adversity, then you're going to definitely be more vulnerable. But my own experience of working with such a wide range of people has taught me that I always have to start with that person's starting point, and I can't make assumptions. You know, our refugee populations have endured incredible hardship frequently, but they have managed, they've survived, and they probably have skills that they can put to the test again if they have to, unfortunately, that will stand them in good stead. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to do a church or fellowship, and I went to Israel, and I remember being told that the older people were able to adapt more quickly because they had been through experiences of bomb threats and war before, and they knew the drill, basically. You know, and so their survival rate was higher. People who put masks on and hyperventilated and didn't get their masks on properly were more at risk. So again, you know, the lesson I've learned is to always not assume and to start at the person's starting point, but always have that on my radar as a possibility that the vulnerability is greater as a consequence.
Great, thank you, Michelle. We've got another question that's come through around how can we help prepare children for future emergencies if they've already been through one? So it kind of leads on from the previous question a little bit. You know, if you've got children that are fearful or uncertain, how can then you encourage them to be prepared without scaring them, I guess?
It's a vexed question, and I know in schools they're often anxious about doing their required emergency evacuation drills or their lockdown drills because it can cause distress amongst the students. And I think we can help kids prepare for future emergencies by having everyday conversations. Not that you do it every day, but it's just part of a conversation about, you know, remember when the fires came and we took this action, you know, we were really good at being able to pack the car quickly and get ourselves off to safety, reinforcing what they did. You know, we've heard people say to talk to children about look for the helpers. Well, we're reminding kids about what they could do, what we did as a family that kept us safe. There's some beautiful books around. I know that this week in Play School they've been talking about who are our helpers. So we're instilling in our children an awareness of there are people there to help, things happen, and there are people who can be there to support you. There's actions you can take. The beautiful range of books by the Birdie Trees books out of Queensland are for preschool age children, and those stories talk to children about worries or challenges that little birdies had and what strategies birdies been able to take to be safe and feel safe. And notice I always talk about the physical safety and the psychological safety. They have to go hand in hand. Red Cross and the Australian Institute of Disaster Resilience also have some beautiful curriculum and booklets that we can use to work with children around it. But I think this is now an everyday part of our life. And I think that as a family, as a school group, as a scout group, to have child-friendly emergency planning where the young people have a voice to help us inform the plan and they know what we're doing and they know what they're doing is the best way to prepare children for emergencies.
That's great, thank you. And you stole my thunder by mentioning all of those fantastic resources, including the well-timed Play School series that's on this week. And you can find most of those resources listed on our Disaster Recovery Bulletin, which you'll find on the VCOSS website as well. I've got one last question that's come through, Michelle, for you. How do you think that COVID has impacted on the ability of children and young people to process their bushfire experience?
So not research, but just my own experience. I've been working with adults and professionals who are working with people impacted by bushfires, but also impacted themselves in the 2019-2020 fires. And my sense is that, you know, the trajectory that we often see people and communities move through after a disaster event has been slowed down. It's not the same in every community, so I'm always a bit wary of saying, oh, you have the honeymoon phase, then you have this, then you have that, because that doesn't always happen for everyone. But I really have found it quite interesting to observe that, as I said earlier, communities often come together after a disaster, and it helps you frame what the experience was and to talk to other people what their experience was and to learn how they're coping and what's working for them, so that you get a bit of a collective recovery process happening. And what happened, I think, with the pandemic was there wasn't as good an opportunity of coming together. And I've seen that for some families that worked really well because they became inward looking, they pulled on their own resources, and their naturalistic recovery was able to occur without all the outside influences of saying, you know, join this group, sign up for this, do this, come to this barbecue. So that those families that were able to pull on their own resources had the resources to call upon, the emotional resources and all the other resources that go with that. For some other families, it's like there's been an arrested development period, you know, where they've just been in a holding pattern and they've just been keeping their heads above water or not. And they've struggled alone and in silence, and then they've been slow to emerge. And people are just starting now to say, actually, I need a hand, please. This is over my, you know, I can't do it. Just give me a hand. Other people are still slow to be emerging from the pandemic hiccup gap that we've had and are still struggling. And so I think our outreach services are really important at this point in time, now that we're out there and we're reaching out and we're putting a hand to people and we're saying, can I give you a hand with this? What would be helpful? We know there are still people in tents on land. We know there are families living in a car on their burnt out properties, and all we can do is reach out and try and do what we can for them. So it has slowed down the response, is my hunch.
And I think if you add the economic impact as an additional layer over that, again, you've got some people in some communities doing it really, really tough. And certainly our hearts go out to them, and we're doing what we can to advocate on behalf of those communities and support them where we can. Thank you so much, Michelle. It's been absolutely fantastic to hear from you. You are staying with us, of course, and we hope that there'll be some more questions for you later in the session. So thank you. I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Di Fisher, who is the Executive Officer for Uniting VicTas in Gippsland. Di's worked in the health, human and community services industry for around 35 years, including for the past 20 years in Uniting. Di is committed to Gippsland and is committed to consumer engagement, quality practices, leadership and working alongside Aboriginal communities. I'm really excited to introduce Di and some of the work that Uniting VicTas did last year around children and young people in the Gippsland region. Over to you, Di.
Thanks very much. I'm going to do a presentation today, and before I kicked off, I just wanted to extend the acknowledgement of country, and I also wanted to acknowledge Michelle's brilliant speech, and it's very clear the wisdom and the compassion that comes through. So thanks very much, Michelle, for sharing all the information that you've been able to with us today. I enjoyed it immensely. The presentation today is part of a joint venture that was undertaken in early 2020 between Plan International and Uniting. And some of it was about capturing a point in time, and then some of it was about planning for the future. So you'll see those two distinct parts as we work through. I just wanted to quickly run through the first couple of slides and then move into the body. So I am using a remote clicker, which has just closed down on me. So just about who Uniting is. Uniting VicTas is a broad social services arm of the Uniting Church in Victoria and Tasmania. And particularly across its Gippsland, Uniting has been present in many forms for the last 40 years. Sorry, my clicker is not working. Okay. So we joined together with Plan International to undertake a rapid assessment, and it was a very rapid assessment, and then develop a theory of change. That theory of change was for the community, not just for Uniting. So I wanted to be clear that there was a collective vision that we wanted to develop a shared interest in the rights, participation and wellbeing of children and young people, particularly in the bushfire recovery efforts across East Gippsland. The project aims were to ensure that there was material available that could help guide the community's work in the future. And really the first part of that work was the rapid assessment. And the rapid assessment was a mapping of the current situation for children and young people across the development and ages in the bushfire affected communities. And the theory of change was to provide a conceptual framework to allow the community and Uniting to plan and action collective contribution for both the immediate and longer term recovery needs of children and young people. The assessment was taken across a very short period of time and included several components. And I want to make very clear in the outcomes of the rapid assessment that no young people were interviewed directly. It was respondents across both local, state and community services. And I'm not sure how you can see that slide. Is that coming up well for you? It's quite small on my screen. But you can see the areas that those services continue. Thank you. So across coordination services, education, early learning, mental health and wellbeing, families, community and children and young people. And the assessment certainly didn't want to claim that we'd interviewed young people. That was never the intent. It was to try and look at the experiences as viewed by the services and look at the mechanisms that we could use to support young people to be more involved. And it was really to start an ongoing conversation around recovery needs for children and young people. I'm just going to ask, is there a way that I can get somebody else to manage the clicker? It keeps unconnecting. Terrific. It just the connection keeps losing. I apologise for that. We might move on to the next slide, which describes some key findings, particularly for children aged in the 5 to 11 year age group. And I'm going to let you read and look at that slide because what I wanted to draw attention to was some of the quotes. So if you can see that very early in on the piece, there were observations that were really painting a picture of the experiences of children and young people. And if I read the first one, we've seen a lot of regression in behaviour, bedwetting, thumb sucking in 8 to 10-year-olds, kids shutting down, separation anxiety and self-harm as a coping mechanism, children seeking parental support to manage and work through this. So even though there might be those 4 top sources of stress in these children, you were seeing that these were the comments that were demonstrating that. It's quite a significant indication of what these children were experiencing. If we could go to the next slide. And again, very similar in terms of the top 4 sources of stress for young people at this time. But again, the quotes. The lack of capacity to debrief kids who took on adult responsibilities. They didn't get school holidays. They worked all through the summer, took on responsibilities of adults and then went back to school, travelling every day, 75 kilometres through burnt bush. So again, there's a very clear link from what the professionals were seeing to what they were also identifying as those top sources of stress for young people at that point in time. If we move to the next, thank you. And again, families, parents managing their own trauma, that of their children, and then parenting from home. Because again, one of the things that was very clear in the rapid assessment was the overlay of COVID and the impact that that had on top of the bushfire disaster. And you can't have those things occur without also understanding the drought that occurred in East Gippsland, and the comments being that farmers were already at breaking point with drought. It didn't matter what came next. They were going to be suffering those series of stress. And the next. When we were looking at the supports available and looking at opportunities for collaboration and coordination, there was a focus in the initial recovery on significant one-to-one therapeutic intervention. We saw gaps in the community and group worked interventions. Again, that was also had an overlay of COVID. And there was gaps in some of the trauma-informed key messaging that went out. Again, we're talking about a point in time because there certainly has been increasing messaging going out since that rapid assessment. The discussion that Michelle was having before about the roles that children and young people can play in all stages, so preparedness, response and recovery, is also highlighted down the bottom about limited opportunities for children and young people to directly engage in their recovery processes, and the inclusion of groups such as Aboriginal children and young people with a disability, LGBTIQ+ community. There were lots of gaps seen for inclusion in the recovery efforts with children and young people. If we could go to the next slide. So really that rapid assessment just showed that there had been a lot of challenges in the initial stages of recovery. It was identified that there was a disconnect between the coordination of children and youth support services and systems across Victoria and also regionally. There was very unclear recovery coordination and governance mechanisms to support children and young people between all of the listed organisations. And again, that is not a criticism, it was a point in time and it was an unprecedented event. So I don't think any of those agencies were able to do any better, but hopefully we can in the future. And they were challenges that lead us into recovery post that disaster. If we can go to the next slide. So for out of the assessment, we also saw that there were some significant opportunities, and there were really 5 areas of opportunity that we believe can occur. That one is around participation and engagement for children and young people. Wanted to look at how we could influence what the future state looked like, how children and young people can express themselves and in a culturally safe environment, and have the skills, connections and opportunities to participate and lead decisions that affect those areas being preparedness, response and recovery. And also better coordination of data gathering on the voices of children and young people in recovery. And because we also deliver service in East Gippsland, we know that the Voices of Children projects that are occurring have gone a long way to actually start to gather those voices. But again, it was a long way into the recovery efforts. If you could go to the next slide for me, please. Social connectedness. We wanted to look at the way that social providers and networks across East Gippsland could really scale up interventions that really focused on community connectedness and support for families to develop their sense of safety and stability in their homes and in their communities, seeing both environments as critical to recovery. We looked at expanding the focus of some of the groups that were established and providing more psychosocial support through community and group work. There was that large focus on individual support when a lot of the communities were looking for opportunities to come together, taking on board Michelle's point that for some families COVID has worked well and for others it has delayed recovery. If we could go to the next slide. Thank you. Around collaboration and coordination, some of the outcomes really looked at the focus on needing clearer recovery coordination and governance mechanisms to focus on children and young people's needs, and to leverage those services that were existing and the networks that were existing to try and embed the coordination recovery approach. If we could go to the next slide. So when we were looking at communication, there were some seen gaps in the public health announcements, in trauma-informed information gathering and provision, and then also looking at utilising children and youth-centred processes. A lot of focus on getting information out to families and adults, but not focusing on how do we get it out specifically to children and young people. There was also some differences between the tiers of governance and their approach to information provision, and we felt that there was a great opportunity to support the community recovery committees moving forward around recovery being an ongoing journey and the information that needs to be provided at different times across the recovery spectrum. If we could go to the next slide, thank you. Just inclusion and drawing back attention that across that cohort of children and youth and across such a diverse geographic area, there are diverse needs and diverse groups, and that children and young people are often grouped together, and that we really needed to be paying particular attention to particular groups within the cohort. So we can move on again. To the next slide, please. So the theory of change and the findings that rapid assessment has led us to then discover and uncover have been put into a visual, if we can go to the next slide. And this visual, which again might be a little bit difficult on the screen, I do apologise, really focused on how we wanted to reach our intended impact, and which is that children and young people's recovery needs are prioritised across East Gippsland. And we wanted to make sure that we had that impact as the main focus for all the activities and actions that we thought we could take and that we could do in partnership with others. So there are a range of outcomes that we're looking for and a range of actions that sit under that. If you could go to the next slide, please. So it really is around looking at taking some of priority strategies and actions, and we really wanted to look at promoting the leadership of children and young people in recovery. And we have example activities, some of which we're hoping to do in a collaborative manner across other organisations, and some that we think need to be undertaken by all levels of government across regions. We also really wanted to influence policymakers to include the voice of children and young people in recovery. And again, you can see some of the suggested actions. And I note that, Michelle, in your talk, you were talking about those child-safe spaces for children and young people during the response, and I really wanted to draw attention to that. That was something that was a really significant gap that was filled, but wasn't part of the planning. So it was done as a reaction rather than as a planned response activity. So I think that's somewhere where we can have some impact. If we could go to the next slide, please. Again, the investment in direct psychosocial support for children and young people, and there's a lot of activities that Uniting are both planning for and have enacted. So some people may be aware that directly following the events in Malakuta, there was a youth-led activity to establish what's called the Sanctuary. And then there was a period of funding that was made available to a group of young people to establish the sanctuary, but no ongoing funding. And it was seen as a critical entry point to the support for young people, particularly across Malakuta and district. So Uniting have actually committed some of their appeal dollars to fund that with seed funding for a community development worker for 2 years to support young people in Malakuta in their recovery efforts and actions. So Uniting, in fact, is not undertaking the actions. The development worker and young people are undertaking the actions, again, as a way to ensure that they meet young people's needs and they meet that community's needs rather than professionals coming in from outside the area and directing what those recovery actions should be. There's also been initial trauma-informed psychosocial support for children through early learning settings, and that was done initially across some of the Uniting early learning centres in East Gippsland and then more broadly across the whole sector. And we were able to mobilise some internal resources to provide that initial support, not just for the teachers or the staff within those settings, but also for the families and children and young people. And that's something that we would recommend continues into the future post-disaster as part of response, not just when we're looking at recovery. We also hope to utilise some of the well-established community programs that are run. The two that I mentioned are Uniting programs. HIPPY, we're subcontract to deliver across East Gippsland, but also the theory of change will be used to direct the work of Communities for Children as a facilitating partner across East Gippsland, and hopefully will focus some of the activity for communities and children as we move into the next round of funding. If you could change the slide for me, please. Again, we see that there needs to be great investment in youth activities, and some of the ones that were coming up as seen as valuable were youth traineeships, particularly in some of the very small communities that were impacted, where employment opportunities were limited for young people post the bushfires, and now COVID on top of that. So that we might be able to look at some of the small local businesses actually being supported to invest in youth employment. Some of the communities are very small and the resources very reduced following these significant events. We also wanted to partner with other child and youth centred and services and networks so that we could work on better resource coordination, advocacy, facilitation, even just the mapping of networks across the area to be able to provide to all levels of government about where we interact with communities to assist in recovery efforts. Can you move on to the next slide? So we're a fair way in to what our next steps are, but continuing to try and promote the findings from the rapid assessment and actioning our theory of change. There is an implementation plan, to guide both Uniting's actions and some of our work to work alongside some other organisations, and that's continuing. So there's been some influence, some change, but still a lot more to come. We hope that this project would be the commencement of ongoing conversations, not just for a community such as East Gippsland, which does suffer many disasters, but for other organisations and other areas to pick up some of this work and really focus and think about the ways that children and young people should and can be engaged in discovery of their needs and wants in disasters. I might leave it there and end the slideshow. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Di. And I would really like to acknowledge the work that you and Uniting have done in bringing this work forward and sharing this work with us today. And I just think it's extraordinary that you were able to really focus on it and prioritise it, in the immediate aftermath of a disaster as well as during COVID. And we know that life is pretty tough in Gippsland for a lot of people a lot of the time, and, that you're no doubt busy 24 hours a day. So a huge credit to the work that you've undertaken here. And I think it's really important work, not just in a disaster recovery context, but in a broader resilience building context. And I think that all of the findings and recommendations that you've made are certainly applicable in the recovery period, but are also applicable in a day-to-day sense in terms of supporting children, supporting young people, to be able to achieve what they want to achieve in their lives, to give them the best start and the best opportunities that they can have during peacetime as well as during a time of disaster. So congratulations, it's just amazing work and undertaken in a time of real trial. We have had a couple of questions come through for you, Di, and please, everybody, don't forget to ask questions. Use the chat function. They do go through to our moderator, and you can ask questions of any of our panellists. A couple of things that you said stood out to me, Di, and one was around connection, and it's something that Michelle spoke about as well, and that importance of connection within families, within communities, and with peers, and how important that connection is to children and young people, and it's how it's something we need to keep front of mind when we're dealing with a disaster or an emergency, is to really foster and nurture and make sure that those connections are strengthened wherever possible. So thank you for that. The first question we have that's come through is that after an emergency, we know that rates of family violence, mental distress, alcohol and drug abuse and other issues can go up. Are you seeing this among young people in Gippsland?
So interesting that that question has come up, because we feel that some of the issues have been masked by COVID. But one of the things, I've been at meetings just this week where particularly family violence and the rates of family violence that are starting to emerge just now are increasing significantly. So I've been in meetings this week across services that deliver specialist family violence, and each and every one of them are citing an increase, particularly in family violence rates, and also suggesting that it's underreported through the formal structures. So it's more coming through some of the less formal reports. So it may not be coming through police. It might be coming through networks in the community, family knowledge and understanding that's then somehow passing through to professionals in some role or capacity and then being reported. So it is interesting, but yes, there are definitely rates, particularly the family violence I could speak to. We certainly found through the rapid assessment that mental distress was high, and that we know that there's been a lot of investment in mental health and wellbeing across the area. The alcohol and drug is interesting. I haven't heard what our current rates of alcohol and drug use, whether they've increased or not. So I wouldn't like to comment. I think we could all talk about what we've seen previously through disasters. But again, I've only heard the family violence rates have been known to increase significantly here.
That's a great point, Di. It is only 12 months, or sort of 12, 13 months after the bushfires, and in terms of recovery, that is actually a very short period. We know that the recovery journey is likely to be in the ballpark of 8 years, and certainly from the Black Saturday bushfires, that was sort of an average of when people would be happy to say they had recovered. So it is a long journey, and in some ways I think some of looking at statistics and data it's too early to really understand what the longer term impact might be. Di, thank you so much for sharing that amazing work with us. As I said, incredible work undertaken during a really tough period. Thank you for taking the time to share it with us today. Please put your questions to Di in the chat, and we'll come back to her later on in the session. We're actually going to take just a short break now, just for 3 or 4 minutes, so you can stretch your legs, grab a cup of tea, a glass of water, what have you. Please come back. We have somebody, a youth worker from YACVic, who's going to talk with us, along with a young person who's going to share some of her experience as well, and then a joint Q&A session. So head off, stretch your legs, and we'll see you in just a few minutes. Thank you.
My friend, she told me she was scared of the summer, not of the flowers, just of the temperature. And if we gotta leave, what in the hell would we take? Photo albums, defense against the heat wave, shadows on the drive home. Golden, but it don't feel so golden anymore. And the colors, they were bleeding bright. 'Cause now all that remains is the colors of the night. As it went up in fire, in fire, in fire. It went up in fire, in fire, in fire. But it's not enough to wish for rain this time. What's it gonna do? Leave us shackled with haze this time. Like empty promises, go ahead tonight. The truth of the matter, are you blind? It's not enough to wish for rain promises of a night, but it's not enough to wish for rain this time. What's it gonna do? Leave us struggling this time. Like empty promises, go ahead tonight. The truth of the matter, are you blind? It's not enough to wish for rain this time. Not rain this time. Not rain this time. Not rain this time. It's not enough to wish for rain this time. Can't just let down the rain. I think it's all okay. It's not gonna heal all the brains. It can't wash away all the mistakes. If you let down the rain, don't guarantee us no safety. Yeah, you can't just let down the rain. Water in the wound, it won't give us time. It's not a reset for you, and no amount of water will make anyone believe it's okay. You let down the rain, don't extinguish the pain.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you managed to get a little bit of a break there. For those of you that were able to hear, you've just heard a sneak peek of a new song that was written by 19-year-old Hannah Cooper. A 19-year-old wrote that song. It's just extraordinary. Hannah's a self-taught singer-songwriter and producer from the Macedon Ranges in central Victoria, living on Dja Dja Wurrung country. Hannah told me she was inspired to compose this song by a friend of hers who said that she was scared of the summer. And this was a statement that stuck with Hannah as the bushfires raged across the country last year. Hannah's decided to release this song tomorrow, so we really literally have just had a sneak peek, as a reminder that a year on, people are still recovering and rebuilding from last year's devastating bushfires, while most of the world has moved on and has been distracted by other things like a pandemic. What an incredibly thoughtful young woman, and what an incredibly talented young woman to have written such an amazing song. And we'll certainly provide you with a link to that song so that you can enjoy it again and, of course, share it with your friends and families. So thank you to Hannah Cooper for that fabulous song. Our next speakers coming up are Carla Hall, and Carla is the Rural Youth Projects Coordinator at YACVic, the Youth Affairs Council of Victoria. And Carla has experience in research, community engagement, event management, program management, and public speaking, which of course will be tested today. We also have with us Quinn Obran. Quinn is a young woman studying criminal psychology at Wollongong University. And Quinn's been a member of Corryong's Youth Working Group to support the bushfire recovery and progression since it started. And Quinn is going to be involved in the working group's future prospects as well. So if I could please give a very warm welcome to Carla and Quinn. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you to Di and Michelle for your amazing presentations earlier. So firstly, I'd just like to again reiterate the acknowledgement for the traditional custodians of the land which we are all living and connecting on. I'm currently on the land of the Gurnai people and would like to pay my deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Like Bridget said before, I'm Carla Hall. I use she, her pronouns, and I work for the Youth Affairs Council of Victoria, which is the peak body and leading policy advocate for young people and the youth sector across Victoria. I sit within the YACVic rural team, as we know that young people and youth professionals within rural and regional Victoria often have unique insights and face different challenges across to those in metropolitan Melbourne. In response, YACVic Rural expands our statewide advocacy for young people in regional communities and the rural youth sector. We focus our presence across the Greater South Coast and Southern Mallee regions, and now in Gippsland and the Northeast through our bushfire recovery work. YACVic Rural works in partnership with young people, youth practitioners and our partner agencies to advocate on issues that affect young people in the sector, that supports and strengthens young people's community participation and self-advocacy support, and resource youth workers and other people who work and volunteer with young people. So YACVic is working with the Victorian Government to hear directly from young people and community members in rural and regional areas about the response and recovery from the devastating bushfires across eastern Victoria, particularly in the communities Towong, Alpine and East Gippsland, around their experiences and ideas for a better future. We are also running training workshops, youth advocacy and leadership training to develop the skills and advocacy and leadership and involve young people in decision making through the recovery and response and relief periods.
So, as Carla was saying, I'm Quinn, I'm 19, and I started working with YACVic at the end of last year, more or less, and I've been doing a lot of work with Corryong's Youth Working Group, which is in northeastern Victoria. One of the things we were looking at in our youth working group was the fact that we get a lot of insight from adults and their opinions, and we think it's about time that youth involvement and our opinions are being mentioned more so. So we started off talking about how everyone understands we're all a youth at one stage, and it's easy to take that in the direction of, if we were all a youth at one stage, then why not just reflect on our mindset from then and put that into this perspective of how youth involvement is effective now. But it's also a matter of relevance. Youth today will never live through the same experiences and grow to conform to any other generation's social norms and vice versa. In Australia, we focus on inequality, giving everyone, despite race, sex, religion, etc., an equal chance and creating an even platform that doesn't discriminate against certain characteristics of an individual. So incorporating youth involvement not only is another step towards tackling inequality, but it also opens up a whole new area to access information on a greater scale and a lot earlier, due to their variety of experiences in current events. And it's a different viewpoint. Like it was mentioned earlier, in the fires, children and young people could reflect and have a look at what their parents or anyone around them and how they reacted in the fires. And it goes to show what areas may need to be improved or worked on in the future.
Well, thanks, Quinn. So in February of last year, YACVic worked together with other core agencies to develop the youth-focused disaster recovery protocol, establishing a framework for different levels of government and emergency recovery response committees and institutions and youth services to implement some of the recommendations that have come from research from previous disasters, as well as the work that we do with our young people and across the sector to inform those protocols. Some of the key takeaways from those were some of the recommendations that were made back in February 2020 were around the importance of implementing those mental health services, which are key to ensure that young people are able to process their experiences. It is important to note that mental health services must be trusted by the young person, trauma-informed and able to be provided without stigma and easily accessible, taking into account the cost and referral pathways and excessive distances of transport that young people face. Often mental health services will be better provided by local youth or health services, which young people have already developed an established relationship with. Recreational programs, which we've heard from our other speakers, that importance of connection and having young people together and develop some semblance of a normal life, and to promote that connection to their community and to people who understand what they've experienced. Such programs can provide a platform for youth workers to subtly access those young people's and assess their well-being and their needs for referral to mental health and other services in situations where young people may not even realise that they need help or be able to articulate their needs or be reluctant to bother other people or bother others for help, as their family community might be also facing significant troubles. and empowering young people, the empowerment, coordination and support to be part of the solution and play an important role in contributing to that recovery and rebuilding efforts, including renewing community cohesion and other conflict and disaster zones. It's often been young people who have led those community programs to rebuild and reconnect their communities. So enabling young people that opportunity and that platform is vitally important to recovery. Beautiful. Quinn, would you like to talk to...
Yeah, I'll begin with this one. What young people need now is, sorry, let me find my... So there was a... Oh, sorry, Carla, what were you saying?
No, that's right. So this is an example of one of the quotes that's come out of our consultation series that we've done with young people.
Yeah, so what young people need now, there was also another survey a while ago that was stop asking us to think out of the box when we don't know what the box is. That's a hard one. A lot of the quotes and questions that come out of this is, we don't particularly know. Speaking for youth, it's hard to understand where funding and where the funding and resources can be spent. With the question of stop asking us to think out of the box when we don't know what the box is, that was more or less a survey regarding bushfire recovery, and one of the questions at the end was, if you could have anything in your town, the think as big as you want, what would it be? Or along those lines. And a lot of us had trouble answering this question because our minds went straight to, well, obviously it couldn't just be anything. It's unfair, or it's hard to ask a question and expect a genuine response when you don't have any information on who or how these ideas can be achieved. Making you question the legitimacy of the statement and the point of the whole survey in general. Youth at the moment, we had the counsellors, as Di was saying, when it comes to the funding with the sanctuary, it came out to begin with, but there wasn't any follow-up. A lot of young people didn't know how they were feeling initially, and it wasn't until later on did they start realising that they may or may not be feeling as well as they expected, and the follow-up counselling would have been great in that respect, for the fact that they could have acknowledged their emotions and found a way to deal with that later on. We didn't have that, as well as the funding and everything. There was no follow-up in that respect.
So these are some of the quotes that have been attributed to different state government politicians and service providers, but it is encouraging to know that the Victorian government is committed to supporting young people in bushfire relief, recovery and preparedness. Our project is funded through the through Bushfire Recovery Victoria and the Department of Education and Training, and we've developed a very close working relationship with these key partners, which has been essential to the success of this project. The department and BRV and YACVic meet weekly to discuss the project through its progression, the emerging themes, the emerging issues, and communicating that directly to them so that it's able to be filtered down through to the other programs that those bodies are facilitating. And so we can keep an ongoing conversation with how young people are coping and thriving and connecting across these bushfire affected communities. So the part of our work through with YACVic is the development of the Bushfire Recovery Working Group. This consists of 12 young people, 12 to 25, currently living in bushfire affected areas. The working group members are currently assisting in the development of new resources to support young people and local communities they've consulted with. Young people and community, consulted with, and young people and community about the fires and what is needed in the recovery response. Our young working group members have also co-delivered local workshops and participated in a number of training opportunities with young facilitators in partnership with local communities. In the immediate response, our meetings were held online, which was navigating that COVID sphere, but it was a great way for our members to connect. Most of our working group members haven't actually met each other before. They're all from different areas, but they all had a very similar experience with regard to being fire and flame affected. Our members have also undertaken training around facilitation and have been co-delivering some of our consultation workshops. Members have also undertaken some training around the implementation of child safe standards and have also helped assist in our online and face-to-face trainings and workshops we have held.
And to add to that, in Corryong, we've had the local youth working group, which is supported by the Corryong Neighbourhood Centre, and also YACVic and other different organisations. But YACVic as well, I was in the youth working group to begin with, and they mentioned YACVic, and I applied with these guys and have since been doing a bit of work with them, which has been a great experience. It's opened up a whole new range of information to find out exactly how this funding and what can be done with everything that's going on. A lot of rural areas don't have access to a lot of the funding and a lot of the information that is around supporting bushfire recovery. And our little working group, we've got a few members, but one of the main things is we've found an aspect to find all this funding with youth involvement, put it towards a positive criteria and aspect of what can be happening in Corryong. And one of the main things we've done here is there's a group of boys, we call them the Amigos. They're all younger than 16 and involved in creating a downhill mountain bike track in the town. We noticed some of their jumps around the area and we scouted them out, and they've since gone and ridden in Bright to get their ideas for their own track, which has not only reinforced their desire to be involved in bushfire recovery, but it also allows them to understand where their participation can be of value and that their opinions and that their input actually does have an outcome and it's effective.
Beautiful, and they are such a fantastic group. I can't wait to get back over and meet them again. So throughout the second half of 2020, YACVic commenced working with the Victorian government to hear directly from young people. And we did this through a series of consultations, engaging young people to genuinely seek their perspectives on the fight, on the bushfires, and what was needed in recovery, rebuilding, response. And we are using that information, those responses, to assist in the development of these new resources on good practice in engaging and supporting young people in local communities. We're also then able to attach our consultations to the development of different training sessions that can be tailored to these young people in these areas around advocacy and having their say in bushfire recovery. Our consultations were co-designed with members of the Bushfire Recovery Youth Working Group, who also assisted in the delivery of these series. We facilitated these workshops face-to-face and online in the bushfire-affected communities of Cairn River, Mallacoota, Orbost, Bensdale, Sarsfield, Corryong and Bright. It was a pretty epic road trip that we were able to go on. We did ensure that mental health services and debriefing opportunities were incorporated into these workshop designs as well. And the workshops were held in places and spaces that were accessible to young people and that young people felt safe and included in, such as youth centres, community education spaces, and even outdoors in a local skate park. Our consultation outcomes were then collated into the emerging themes reports, which are available on our website. They were developed and shared with local service providers and our young people so that they could see that their voices and their opinions and suggestions were being used to assist in planning for those recovery-based activities and for our engagement with young people moving forward.
So Carla came to Corryong for one of our youth working groups. We're very lucky in Corryong. We have a youth space which is accessible for anyone in between 12 and 25. and there's a few facilities there, not as much as the sanctuary, but we have a bit going for us. But it's the fact that YACVic has come to the town and reinforced our ideas and gave us an insight into where and how that the progress in which our ideas and what we're up to is doing. It was a hard year, and after enduring the fire season and the devastation to which the fires caused, to now surviving a pandemic, there's been a very minimal time in between for individuals to find closure and a somewhat peace within themselves post-fires. Where the time for debriefing with others through the telling of shared experiences and allowing for that time to recover mentally has essentially not happened to the extent to which it is needed. And although it has opened a lot of chances for people to learn to how to enjoy their own company, I think that's very important, and how to become more self-reliant and figure out where and how well they're actually doing. Because when it comes to recovery, it's important to understand how individually, without distractions of others, an individual is actually doing, and that doesn't just go for youth, that goes for everyone. And the fact that we can go to this youth space, we can have Carla from YACVic acknowledge our group. Corryong kids don't realise that they do have a lot of people knowing what's happening in the town. So it was good to reinforce that and understand for us that things are happening and there is progress going on, whether it's in front of them, but a lot of the time it is behind the scenes.
So we have had our emerging themes that were identified through these consultations, and there are several elements of the recovery project which we will continue to develop and implement over the coming months. Recommendations from the project will be made and included in our final report and will be inclusive of the consultations already undertaken. So we're also utilising our online survey for those young people that may not have had the opportunity to come along to one of our consultations, which will remain open until May. The report will be produced in collaboration with our youth working group, and the initial draft will be presented to DT and BRV in July. Communities and organisations involved in the project will then have the opportunity to have input, and those recommendations will then come out of those, and then will be delivered through a series of community meetings that we've coined Getting on the Same Page. Sorry, my clicker's stopped working too now. Beautiful. So just quickly we've also got a series of other projects happening in terms of bushfire recovery within the Youth Affairs Council Victoria, one of those being activators, and RSPCA has partnered with YACVic this year to support young leaders to improve animal welfare and rebuild and build resilience in bushfire affected communities through this program. So these young leaders that have participated in this program have activated meaningful change in their communities and developed their ideas across research, advocacy and project management and communication. After putting their lives on hold for the community, young people in bushfire affected communities deserve to be supported with mentoring, funding and training to regain control over their lives and shape their own future. So we are going to just play a short film. This film is actually being launched tonight at 6 p.m, but we would love the opportunity to provide you a sneak preview within this forum.
I remember my family and I, it was that hot summer day, and we were looking up into the sky and we saw this huge mushroom cloud, and we were like, oh, should we leave or should we stay?
And I remember flying home, and we come from Auckland to Melbourne, and you could see the fires so brightly. It was such a surreal experience, and yeah, getting home and seeing what it had done and just being around it was such a crazy experience.
Care about young people making change, because we are the future, we are the next generation, and everything's going to start relying solely around us, and we need to step up and take that confidence and courage to take the next steps in our life.
I think in this day and age, being a young person is such an amazing thing, like watching what's going on around us and seeing all these young people coming with these amazing ideas and not being scared to speak out anymore. It's such an amazing community to be a part of.
The program's really given us kind of a proper tangible way that we can make a big impact, because often, you know, you want to make a change but you don't really know where to start, and this really offered a good way to start one project and also to learn skills to then go off and do things on your own.
My favourite part about Activators has been getting to know new people who have a lot of things in common, and it's just been great getting to know all the different mindsets and like the different problems around Victoria and the different things that all these people are coming up with to help the communities. It's just been really great.
I have learnt so much from Activators. I'm building a website, which I never thought I would ever be able to do in my life. I've learnt so much about other people and how I can interact with new people. Like being in a small town, you never really meet anyone totally different, and being able to meet these people has been absolutely amazing.
I feel like young people, they know a lot. Some people think they don't, but you do know a lot, and we're very aware of all the issues in the world.
I don't speak for all young people, but I know that I've been born with a sense of urgency. I don't want to live in a future that's desolate, dry, volatile. I want to live in a lush, abundant, fair, ecologically sound future. And young people can do that, especially through support systems like YACVic.
Beautiful, thanks for that. So I guess just wrapping up our next steps throughout this program, there is quite a few still to come. YACVic is supporting the Department of Education to develop a student-led co-designed disaster recovery network. This ongoing network will focus on empowering young people to produce ideas on how best to engage students in all levels of education, build connections with diverse young people, and improve disaster responses. Like I said before, our Bushfire Recovery Survey is also still open with the aim to actively engage young people to have their voice heard with regards to their experiences and their within the recovery and response. We are also delivering a series of workshops focusing on the community recovery committees and providing them with training around youth engagement and participation, how to support young people to be involved in those community recovery committees in a meaningful and supported way. Child safe standards, giving those committees the basics of the 7 standards of the 7 child safe standards, and also the code of ethical practice for the Victorian youth sector. And this is a framework to help people who work or engage young people to think through the ethical dilemmas that may arise through this work. We are also working with our young people to develop a series of resources, a good practice guide for youth participation and inclusion. It will also include information on making sure youth cohorts such as disabled young people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people, LGBTQIA+ young people, and young people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds also feel safe and included, as well as a series of fact sheets, including effectively engaging, including and consulting with young people, opportunities for young people in recovery and rebuilding, and including young people in committees and governance. We are delivering also a series of youth advocacy workshops within schools across these bushfire affected areas rolling out throughout March, and also some youth advocacy in the media training that's also being delivered. I believe we're heading down to Mallacoota for that one next. So thank you so much for the opportunity and the time to present on this work today.
Thank you so much, Carla, and a special thanks to you, Quinn. I just think, your voice is so powerful, your words are so powerful, an awful lot of wisdom there in a young person's body. And that was really reflected again too in that extraordinary video, which I don't know about everybody else attending, but certainly brought tears to my eyes. Really, really powerful stuff. And I think it really goes to show just how rich, informative and important all of the presentations have been today, everything that we've heard, but particularly what we've heard just now from young people themselves have been really extraordinary. And I'm really sorry that we're not going to have time to get to further questions with our panel. We have run out of time. I didn't want to stop and interrupt anybody because I think each of the presentations has been extraordinarily valuable. I really hope this is a discussion that we can continue collectively. I think we've all got an awful lot to learn from one another. And I think one of the key things for me, and that I've heard from each of our presenters today, has been the importance of not providing services to children and young people, but working with them, enabling them, empowering them, supporting them, and facilitating them and their voices and what they have to bring to the table. So look, I just want to extend my huge thanks to Michelle, to Di, to Carla, and of course especially to Quinn and Hannah for making the time today to share in their expertise, their experience and their insights into disaster recovery. A huge thank you to our two Auslan interpreters. And then finally, a thank you to everybody who's attended today. Thank you for your interest in children and young people in disaster recovery and for your support of the role of community organisations that work so closely with children and young people to ensure that their voices and experiences are heard and understood and can help inform the future directions of disaster recovery. So a very good afternoon to you all, and we'll see you at the next Disaster Recovery Conversation in March. Thank you, everybody.
Cause now all that remains is the colours of a night. But it's not enough to wish for rain this time. What's it gonna do? Leave us struggle remains this time. Like empty promises, go ahead tonight. The truth of the matter, are you blind? It's not enough to wish for rain this time. Not rain this time. Not rain this time. Not rain this time. It's not enough to wish for rain this time. Can't just let down the rain and think it's all okay. It's not gonna heal all the brains. It can't wash away all the mistakes. If you let down the rain, don't guarantee us no safe.